Hello, everybody. I used to enjoy reading the New York Times when I was much younger, and the more you look at the headlines from the Times, the more disturbing it becomes year after year. There was an article about New Hampshire being too white. About 94% of New Hampshire residents are white, and there should be an issue of trying to develop more diversity in the population there. They cite a woman from Colombia who went to New Hampshire and couldn't find anyone who spoke Spanish. Had a lot of trouble, and the only person she ended up finding was a maid or hotel worker who eventually went back to Colombia. Is this the reason why diversity is for? What do they want to replace the population of New Hampshire for its own sake, or what is the motive behind it? Is it for social reconstruction, or is it could be another way of looking at it? And this is the way I would prefer to look at it. I have no problem with Hispanics or brown colored people, if you want to call it that, going to New Hampshire and to enjoy what New Hampshire has to offer. And I would also include Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine in this assessment because they are very much homogenous. Why would you go to Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine in the first place? Well, for one thing, these states have very, very low crime rates. Standard of living is actually quite high. Schools and education opportunities are very good. Life expectancy is also very high. If we look at a city like Burlington, Vermont, the life expectancy there is probably higher than any other city in the United States, or close to. Why is it this way? Is it because of demographics? Well, one could make that argument. You would say the same thing about Miami, Florida, or Elizabeth, New Jersey, or Santa Ana, California. You take your pick. Some of these urban places are just ripe with crime, social dysfunction, which we do not see in places like Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and other states as well. But we'll just use that as a focal point for this discussion. One of the things that make these places special is they are aesthetically very beautiful places to live. And there's a reason why people go there, vacation there, and spend their money there, as opposed to places like, Detroit, which is not really yes, I'm sure there's nice places to visit in Detroit, but it's hit on hard times. The rural character, the sleepy farms, the pastures surrounded by mountains that ablaze in color in the fall, the skiing opportunities, hiking, and things of that nature. What if I would encourage a Hispanic person from Colombia or some other part of Central America to come to Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, but to go there with certain different expectations. Okay, so you're not going to have that many people speaking Spanish, but you go someplace that's safe, where your children will be safe. They'll have good schools, good quality water, a very beautiful environment in which to live. Yes, the winters are kind of cold and all that, but the seasons themselves are just spectacular. Why not enjoy what these three states have to offer? Why not enjoy the winter sports opportunities that abound there? Why not get an interest in maple syrup and things of that nature? Become a farmer. There are so many things that these states offer, and what kind of people do you want going there? People who want to change it for the sake of change, or to want to preserve it and appreciate what these states have to offer. Whenever we start meddling with making social changes to and demographics to certain places, for what ends are we actually trying to make those changes for? Why wouldn't Hispanic or brown people enjoy the aesthetics that Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine offer? Why do you want to change that? Well, what's wrong with it? The fact that the New York Times finds it inherently wrong that these states are predominantly white. And why is that? Is that racism? It certainly sounds that way. Why do you want to help change or replace a culture that is there? Why not invite people to go there with the expectation that they should at least try to appreciate what Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine have to offer? If you're coming from Central America, used to the tropics, that may not be the best environment that you would like. Maybe you would be happier in Florida. That's fine. But to make it kind of like, it's almost like coercive, like we have to change this. Why do we have to? What are the consequences of making those changes? These are the questions that are never really asked. I belong to hiking clubs, the Appalachian Trail and Long Trail, and all these that prevail in this part of the country. And there is a underrepresented of African Americans and Latinos. There's probably a little bit more Hispanics than African Americans, actually, but it is very much, if you go to the Appalachian Trail Conference, it's predominantly white. Certain kinds of activities, certain kinds of places, certain kinds of cultures are going to attract certain people more than others. The reasons for that, I don't think, are important. Why not just let it be? It's a totally different concept. If someone who lives in, let's say, Woodstock, Vermont, and they see Hispanic family come in here, and they're moving in, and they say, we don't want these kind of people here. That is extremely different than what New York Times is proposing. The New York Times is proposing a coercive, a diligent effort to change something, to replace a population, to get the 94% down to below 50, let's say, or whatever number arbitrary number they're looking for. I would say if I was in a town like Woodstock, Vermont, and there was a Hispanic couple moving in, and they were interested in the history of the region, the culture, the landscape, the outdoor activities that are abound, I mean, that's terrific. Absolutely. Why would you look at anyone like that different from any other person that decided to move to your state or your town? Why? Being colorblind is being colorblind. You want to attract people who are interested in your culture? Absolutely. But once we start measuring and putting numbers and saying this percentage is wrong, that percentage is wrong, it is not fair. If I were to move to Colombia, I would try to appreciate Colombian culture. I would certainly learn the language. And I would have to accept that as it wouldn't completely change me. I'd still be American and Caucasian, but I would be living in a culture where I would want to adapt. If I was making the effort to move to Colombia, I would want to be more like a Colombian, because that was an interest. That's why I went there. I wouldn't want to expect it to look like Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. I wouldn't expect it to look like New York. That would be beside the point of going there in the first place. The same thing with any other country. You go to Japan and they say, oh, there's too many Japanese here. We need to change the numbers. We need to have more of an ethnic balance. I mean, if it happens naturally and organically, absolutely. Certainly New York City is like that. It's always been a kind of a place where people gather from all over the world. The same is true for London. But to say that we want to replace that population, and there's a sinister element to that. And it does remind me of Nazi Germany, where the Jewish population was a problem in those days. We're seeing similar echoes in South Africa as well. And just because it's against white people, I mean that is such a hypocritical standpoint to be coming from. And I think Americans, I think the world is getting sick and tired of this. Oh, if we could only look at each other by the content of our character. If only. If only. And I really thought in my generation we were really heading towards that. Right now it looks like I'm getting bitterly disappointed by it, the trends. But I have to say that with the voices out there in social media, the people who are standing up for decency. I mean, I'm talking about real decency. I do have some hopeful prospects. I think this is just a phase. We realize that we're administering too hard to gain certain types of results. And as long as people are able to live free, express themselves, and do what the God-given abilities to do what they want in life, then we have made it a successful society. And that's what I'm hoping for. And I think we're getting there. And in America, we're blessed by that. And I'd like to know what you think about my commentary today. And please, if you want to support my efforts, please buy the books. I think you'd find them very inspirational. And I'll see you again soon.